Hi, everybody. Welcome back. John Kenny with Cotney Attorneys and Consultants. And this morning, I have on our interview here with the industry, I have Bill McHugh, Executive Director, and Mark Duffy, who's President of the Chicago Roofing Contractors Association. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great. Glad to be here, John.
Glad to have you both.
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Chicago Roofing Contractors Association, I mean, myself, third generation, so I can only go back that many years, but you guys have always been a great name in the industry as an association. You got a huge history. How about sharing with everybody on here today a little bit about history of the Chicago Roofing Association?
Yeah, thank you, John. The Chicago Roofing Contractors Association is really the oldest trade association of its type in the country. It formed right after the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, where we lost a lot of buildings. Resources were pooled together to help rebuild the city very quickly. And in some of that work, forwarding on another 30 years to the construction of non-combustible buildings, high-rise buildings with this new concept called a low-sloped roof. Think about it, 1890s, new construction, new concept, low-sloped roof. The built-up roof was actually invented in Chicago as the high-rise buildings were starting to be constructed here. So the history of CRCA goes back a long, long way. Matter of fact, you'll see on the NRCA's charter, several of the CRCA leaders of the day are on the NRCA's charter documents that helped the National Roofing Contractors Association get started. Of course, there were many others from Jersey, Philadelphia, Boston, et cetera, but many of the CRCA leaders were there too. So a long history at CRCA. Really glad to be part of it and have been part of it since 1981, 40 years worth of time.
Excellent. Mark, how would you like to add from a roofing perspective about the organization? A little bit. You got to be proud to be president of an organization that dates back that far.
Yeah, I am. Our company ourselves, we've been members for multiple years. I'm not even sure what year we started with the CRCA, but it's got to be back in the 80s. I myself have been part of the CRCA. I've been on the board since 2010 and started as president January of 2020. As far as a member of the CRCA, I mean, the benefits that we get from the organization, I mean, you can't even count them.
Yeah, I know we're a member, and we know how many benefits that you guys offer. Excuse me. Is there a couple you may want to highlight, either Bill or Mark, for the people listening?
You know, it's a great question, John. And you know, the benefits go back over 100 and some odd years. Part of the reason why the CRCA was formed was to give credibility to those contractors that invested in their workforce, their materials, and made sure that the warranties that they gave back in the day before the manufacturer warranty showed up, made sure they were worth something. The quality of the association continues to be amazing. The resources that are provided from advocacy, for instance, we're involved at the local, national, and state code development processes. Just yesterday, I was on the International Code Council, International Building Code Development hearings, testifying in support of the NRCA's positions. And we've done that for several years, in addition to what we do locally. If you think about some of the things that you've heard about Chicago, where, for instance, existing buildings, the energy code mandated some very thick insulation that would have had the whole top of the roof rebuilt. We were successful in getting reasonable requirements for roof insulation for existing buildings, so the building owner and manager didn't have to rebuild the top of the roof through the local and state code development processes. You heard probably that in the early 2000s that Chicago wanted a white roof. Well, that white roof wasn't quite true. Reflectivity came, though, and the CRCA worked with the city of Chicago to make sure those regulations were doable and enforceable. The advocacy work that we do there, in addition to that, is in licensing, too. In Illinois, there's a state licensing law for the company, not the individual, but the company, to make sure there's a benchmark level of performance that protects the consumer, building owner and manager, residential building owner and manager, from unscrupulous contractors. Between that and the networking that gets done at the CRCA events, our trade show that brings 2,500 of our best friends together for a day and a half in Chicago, the education that goes on at that trade show, at the membership conferences and meetings, the committee networking. Over 100 people show up for committee day. There's so many things that the CRCA does, in addition to its webinars, to educate the members, get them on the cutting edge of technology, the cutting edge of code development, to know what the rules really are, so that when people are starting to throw stories at them during competition, they can make sure they compete fairly with the facts in the industry. So a lot of stuff goes on at CRCA, in addition to the basic benefits of, free membership meetings, access to Cottony through its partnership there, and many, many more.
Yeah, and your background is technical, correct, Bill?
Actually, I come from the industry, John. My first job right out of school in 1981 was as a technical representative and sales representative for a construction products manufacturer in both roofing and waterproofing, and also an air barrier. So many of these companies I've known since I was 22 or 23. And frankly, I can tell you, I got my best training from those companies, up on the roof, in their offices, learning what their day-to-day issues are. Because, a contractor gets up for a different reason of the day than the manufacturer does. The manufacturer sells materials. The contractor's got to worry about the safety of their workers, getting the material there, making sure it gets down properly, collecting the money. There's so many things and so many variables that go in the contractor's life that if you're a manufacturer and don't know that, really does a disservice to you, because you really have to understand their shoes to be able to service them the way they need to be serviced. So, yeah, my background's in the industry, and I've been hanging out in the technical and also, of course, the business side of it too, because it's both of my backgrounds. Thanks.
Yeah, I know you mentioned on the codes, which is true. I saw you were on the meetings and the codes committee coming up for the changes coming up. So you guys are at the forefront of keeping up with that. Kind of go back a little bit of history. I'll throw this at you. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not from Chicago, so if I'm off on this, correct me. But when you talked about starting right after the Great Fire, is that not true that the building, from far as I know in history, that's kind of what led to building codes coming in as well as after that fire? So really, you guys have been involved in this from day one.
Sorry, John, it broke up. Can you say that again?
Oh, sorry, no problem. I said about going back to the history of the organization, and that I believe you mentioned about starting right after the Great Fires of Chicago. If I'm not mistaken, that's kind of when all the code formations of starting to talk about building codes. And that's when I know the founders of the organization really got into adding that slag on top of the roof and the stone for fire protection and all that. So, you guys have been involved in developing really the codes that have evolved to where we are today. Is that a correct statement?
Absolutely, it is. If you think about it, the UL and the ASTM standards for spread of flame, intermittent flame, and the burning brand, that's the E108, I believe. That standard is a result of the Chicago fire, where burning brands, in other words, wood, parts of wood structures, got light enough that they just floated from building to building and spread fire from building to building, without the building being attached to the other building. That standard resulted from the Chicago fire. And yeah, there were a lot of code development that took place through the early part of the century. And then CRCA, even through the 40s, 50s, 60s, and into the 70s, I can remember starting my career and seeing CRCA, CSI Chicago specification books that talked about best practices for built-up roofing. Matter of fact, the manual that I have in my archives predates the NRCA manuals with technical details and specifications for both coal tar and asphalt built-up roofs. Pretty amazing what the volunteer leaders of CRCA have done over many, many decades. And pretty cool also, if you think about it, our friend Bill Good retired from NRCA. His grandfather worked at CRCA through the 20s, 30s-ish, that time period. So a lot of history, a lot of roots for the national organization. And, CRCA has been at the forefront of a lot of things for a lot of years. But really, it comes back to the member leadership. They support this association like there's no tomorrow, involved, debating back and forth what the best thing is for the building owner and for the good of the industry. competitors coming together and finding a way to make the industry better. It's just amazing to watch what these volunteer leaders and their predecessors have done for decades and over 100 years.
Yeah, it's all to bring that up. I know a lot of people don't realize that, but there's so much history in our industry that developed where we're at today. And it really, you guys are the birthplace of it. There's no doubt. Anything you want to add to that, Mark, before I move on to the next question that we may have missed from your perspective?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on what Bill was saying about the benefits, from a member side. But I mean, I would say he hit on them, but the three that I would focus on were the networking, the educational, and the technical. I mean, it's just you can't get that kind of information without this group. There's educational seminars at the trade shows. We have webinars, the networking. You got trade shows, you got luncheons, you got events, and then as far as a contractor side too, the health and safety committee, what they do for us as a roofing contractor is leading edge. We're always on top of safety within CRCA.
Excellent. And I can only imagine having, especially with COVID, having that much of a chance to travel too far. But when you guys all get together, it's got to kind of be like a family reunion in some aspects with all the multiple generations involved in your roofing companies. And that's got to be great. There's got to be so much talent always mixing into one room. The networking events have to be great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Want to touch on another thing. I know you have the CRCA Foundation. Actually, it wasn't too long ago. We had an event on there. We all tried to raise some money through Roofer's Coffee Shop. I know you guys were involved in it and donations. Great foundation. How about explaining a little bit about that so folks out there may not be familiar with it, become a little more familiar?
Thanks, John. The foundation evolved from CRCA's feelings that they should give back to the industry. We've had scholarship awards for a long time, over 15, 20 plus, even longer, hundreds of thousands of dollars the association has given to students that want to further their education. There's actually two scholarships, because there's actually two entities at the CRCA. The Chicagoland Roofing Council is the union-only contractors, and they have a scholarship for those contractor company families that are signatory to the Local 11 International Union of Roofers, Waterproofers, and Allied Workers. The second scholarship is more open, and it's given to anyone that's wants to apply for that scholarship. We get hundreds of applications per year. And again, hundreds of thousands of dollars have been donated over the years. The CRCA decided, let's do more in the philanthropic department, if you will, and form a foundation so that we can have individuals donate as a deductible item, tax deductible, because to a 501c6 corporation, which is what CRCA is, it's not really something that individuals can donate to it as they could to a 501c3, which is more of a charitable organization. So we decided to move that philanthropic efforts over to the foundation, and we appreciate having Trent on that board and many of the other leaders, both locally and nationally. And that group has already raised a significant amount of money. They're getting close to having enough such that it can finance the scholarships. But they also want to do other things, do some philanthropic installations locally on behalf of those that really need it. The NRCA did a really cool thing, and CRCA members were heavily involved in the Ronald McDonald House efforts to get those roofs maintained, replaced if they needed, recovered if needed. And that's the kind of stuff that the CRCA Foundation wants to do as well. Been quite successful. Really appreciate Cotney committing to match the donations up to a certain amount that were made during that Roofer's Coffee Shop drive. It was a great thing and a big deal.
Yeah, our pleasure. I mean, one thing I love about the roofing industry, and there's not enough talk about it, is the amount of give back, whether it's through charity roofs, whether it's through scholarships or helping out people as they need it. But very, very charitable group we are. I have to, and that's what I enjoy too. So I'm glad you got a chance, and you guys are leading the way. There's no doubt. You got a great foundation. Perfect. One other question, if I may jump onto, and kind of maybe you guys could take this from both perspectives. We had 2020, which was an unusual year, at least in the modern history. We went through a pandemic. We still are in it, but we're coming out the other side. It appears to be, anyways. I always love being optimistic. So your organization actually had to go through it before 100 years ago and came through it okay. So as we're at, so now we're into 2021. We're at a lot of mixed emotions and messages about what's going on. We hear, for the most part, most areas are facing either material shortages, material price increases, backlog maybe not as great as they want, but some areas are better. So just kind of from your area perspective up there, how do you guys see 2021 and maybe kind of floating us into 2022 if you can go that far through it, what you see so far?
Yeah, thanks, John. It's almost like we have to look at 3 years. We've got to look at 2019, which was a fabulous year. The start of 2020 at our trade show in January, we were all thinking, my God, this is going to be an amazing year, 2020. And then March hit, and we all said goodbye face to face and hello virtually, just like we are today. Mm-hmm. The CRCA, from an association perspective, is very blessed to have loyal members. Our membership stayed strong. We didn't drop like crazy like others. Certainly our 2021 trade show and seminars did not take place. So we wound up moving to a virtual educational program. We didn't even try one of those virtual trade show things because we've all been on them and they're not all that easy to do. We decided to just focus on something we knew we could do well, which was education, and had a 3-day education session during our normal roofing week in Chicago program. And throughout 2020, we also shifted from membership meetings in person to weekly webinars, actually, a whole ton of them from about April through July of 2020. Then we backed off to a couple of months to try to make sure we give the opportunity for members to get education like they normally would at a membership meeting, at a conference, at the trade show and seminars. And those went quite well and turned some real opportunities for us to connect with our members virtually with new material like air barriers, like waterproofing, panels with roof consultants, contractors, general contractors on them. You'll see versions of these showing up at various manufacturer programs now based on what we did in January. Then looking ahead to 2022, we actually had a trade show committee meeting in person, all socially distanced, spread out, masked up and all that stuff so that we could plan 2022's January trade show. As far as we know, we're moving forward with that trade show. We don't know what it's going to look like as far as the size of it, et cetera. But by then, most everyone's going to be vaccinated. And if the rules are we're wearing masks, we're wearing masks, but we're looking forward to being together with our friends, our manufacturer partners, our distribution partners, the contractors and others, so that we can meet again and do what we normally do. So looking ahead to 2022 from the association perspective, we're bullish. And I'll let Mark talk to what they're seeing from a contractor perspective on the business side for the roofing industry and what they're seeing for backlog from 2021, et cetera, et cetera. Mark, you got some thoughts?
Yeah, yep. To hit on what he said, 2020 when the pandemic hit, we had contracts in place on the contractor side. There were some contracts pulled back due to the pandemic, but it seemed like the year stayed pretty steady. Coming into 2021, we were looking at, it looked like at least for the first half of the year, it was going to remain busy. Had a good outlook, still have a pretty decent outlook for 2021. The issues we are running into is what you had mentioned, price increases, material shortages, problems with deliveries, you name it, they're hitting on it right now. It seems like 2021 is going to be an interesting year for all of us contractors. And it seems like the material shortages and the increases aren't going away before the end of the year. Hoping that the material problem straightens itself out by 2022.
Yeah, you're very consistent from what we're hearing in most parts of the country, but as roofers, we are very resilient, so we'll work our way through that as well. But well, at least you got backlog. That's the most important thing, and everything else will hopefully we're getting a great perspective. That's all I have with questions. I'll leave if you guys have anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to get out there, or do you think of anything I didn't cover that you'd like to tell the folks? Let's go ahead and now's a good time.
Yeah, thanks, John. We appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you, a partner of CRCA, and to talk about our industry, something that we spend our careers at. Careers are a long period of time, and I better like the people you're with, the industry you're with. And, I can tell you, celebrating my 40th year in this industry, I thought to myself as I was getting into it, well, gee, roofing, that can't be that complicated. Gee, I can tell you, I'm still learning about technical details, business issues, legal issues, safety issues. Our industry is just incredibly complex. And, the contractors are amazing, creative people that find ways to make stuff happen and still play within the rules to be safe, to make sure they're compliant with the codes, to make sure that they're compliant with the manufacturer's installation instructions, and, provide a leak-free roof to the building owner and manager, which is what everybody's looking for. So I'm always amazed at how, after everything's done, it works. And great industry, great place to be.
Good points. Mark, any closing statements?
Yeah, thanks for having us, John. And, if anybody has any questions about CRCA, reach out, call the CRCA office, talk to Bill or Linda, or even go check our website, crca.org. We're here to help.
Great. Well, again, I want to thank you both for joining, taking time out of your busy day. Great interview, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.